Before I move into a little bit of background about math, I wanted to first start by really just, we've kind of let you know who we are. We just wanted to reach out and let you know how much we value you. We value every single one of our students and families. We care very deeply about the experience they're having here at West Park High School. And that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. We wanted to open lines of communication with you and talk with you about what math looks like right now at West Park High School, as well as talking about some action steps that you can take that will allow you some ways to support your student from your end. So we've been doing a lot of listening to parents, and we've done a lot of talking and strategizing, and we decided that we really wanted to come together as a community and talk about who we are, what our vision is here at West Park for not just math, but all of our instruction. We have an innovative math team, and we wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and some of the ways that we want to not just be give your child a solid education in math, but a leading education in math. That's part of our vision. So a little bit of background about what's happened in math in case you're not following this or you didn't know. Math in the United States in the last couple of decades has really flatlined. And when there's a test called the PISA test that they give every 3 years to 15-year-old students all over the world, including the United States. And one of the things that we found in the United States, our last PISA exam, we ranked 31st in math in the world out of 79 countries. And we have been paying attention to that, especially in Northern California. Mr. Parr and I have had conversations about how Northern California is not, it's hard to compare the whole United States as one entity because states are very different from each other in our country. Some of our states rank lower than Uganda in the way they score, and some of our states are better. California is not best, but Northern California tends to do pretty well. But as a result of these troubling statistics that educators in our country have been looking at over the past couple of decades, there's been a whole body of research that has come out about mathematics instruction. And it's really the idea of moving away from maybe the math that our parent community has experienced traditionally growing up in high school, where the teacher kind of stands at the board, works out the problem, gives the students an opportunity to work the problem or a similar problem at their desks. And then the homework is, questions 1 through 20, answers are in the back of the book. What they have found is that that kind of instruction is not conducive to getting not just high rankings in math, but really preparing students for the world that's in front of us. And if any of you were present at one of our West Park parent nights back in the spring, Mrs. Guzman talked about the world that is in front of us and what it's going to take for our students to be successful in it. They are going to need skills that allow them to problem solve, to critique each other's work, to persevere through complexity, to understand that there are more than one approaches to a solution. And so what's happened is that mathematics instruction has really changed. And it's been very exciting. And here's just you don't have to read all of these, you can't see them, but if you want to look at the red line on the left, that's where the United States ranked in 2015. We have not climbed out of that. So that's the research basis for some of the instructional moves we're making. I'll let you read that. This is typical. US high schools in the United States tend to teach math differently than other countries. We're trying to change that. There's a woman named Jo Boaler who is out of Stanford, and she comes out of Stanford with several others, including Dan Meyer, who does 3-act math, if you want to look that up. But she has this great quote that I want to share with you. She says, "There are 2 versions of math in the lives of many Americans. The strange and boring subject that they encountered in classrooms, and an interesting set of ideas that is the math of the world and is curiously different and surprisingly engaging. Our task is to introduce this second version to today's students, get them excited about math, and prepare them for the future. So there's been some shifting in math, and we want to just recognize and acknowledge right now that we are a new high school trying to open, in a pandemic with hybrid learning and lots of variables to consider here. But we also are very committed to the that's ahead. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Parr at this point, and he's going to talk a little bit about that vision. And I'm going to turn it over to him. All right. I'm going to give him my computer. Let's go to the next.
Sorry for the small transition here, but it was easier than unsharing a screen and resharing a screen. But thank you, Ms. Eisenhower. I think that really painted a good picture for what we are trying to incorporate here at West Park High School. Is we don't want that traditional math that has happened for years and years. We want that second approach. We want those students to really grapple and get in and understand the mathematics and what it is that we actually are going for along this journey. Sorry, trying to navigate her screen here to figure out. Okay. So along those lines, our journey here, we see it as a connected integrated sequence, going from IM1 through IM3. And that's another barrier for some students. They're coming in from different schools, having different experiences, and we're trying to guide them and navigate them along the way to push them towards what we believe is a true mathematical experience here at West Park. And I think the root of what we're trying to get to is we want expert learners. And that's not just in mathematics, that's across the board. We want students to be able to utilize technology. We want students to be able to research when necessary, take that knowledge and apply it to new and interesting situations that come up. And that's what we see math as. We want to connect ideas. So what we've done is we've started talking about the seasons, and those of you that have been in the talks from the beginning, you've heard me talk about seasons, but some of you may not be familiar with why we're doing the seasons. So just to get a little bit deeper into what we're doing, we split it up and we started the first quarter with patterns. And that's a Joe Bowler idea: low floor, high ceiling. Let students get in, let them mix it up, and see what they come up with and help guide and facilitate direction. And then we pushed into functions, and we've been adjusting along the way, just like the students. And I think Mr. Pagel said it really well this afternoon. He said, hey, we're modeling learning right now. Like, we are mixing it up with them, and it's not perfect, but we're going to come every day with the best that we can, and we're going to adjust and we're going to make it the best that we can. So I think those experiences from the student side and our side are really important to intertwine. And then we're pushed into solving. And a lot of students got feedback and said, man, solving was the hardest unit because I didn't have the time. And what we've done is pushed all these units and we've integrated them throughout. So for example, stuff that they've learned in the patterns unit is integrated into the functions unit, which is showed up again in the solving unit. And now it's showing up in geometry. And these kids are able to build a deeper connection because they've had time to look at these things and see the different avenues that these areas of mathematics can get into. And it's creating deeper connections for students. And that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for a deeper connection between mathematical ideas. And it's not just all in IM1. We've done the same things in IM2 and IM3. And we're not only aligning across seasons, but we're also aligning through IM1, 2, and 3 as we progress. So some of these ideas get re-hit not only throughout the year of IM1, but they'll come up again in IM2, and truly trying to integrate ideas so that students just get that time to go deeper and have some interesting conversations. So by the time they end their math journey with this series, they get the choice. They get the choice and they have the understanding where they can go in whatever direction they want to go in. They can explore some statistics. They can push towards the calculus route. We just want them to be expert learners and feel confident that they can go into anything and continue to pursue mathematics. So that's kind of our vision for our journey. Um, they have unlimited resources. We are different than a lot of schools and had a lot of really deep conversations about, okay, so we're in this online environment. What do we want students to be able to do and be able to learn out of this situation? So we said unlimited resources, use your notes, give purpose to your work that you've already done, create portfolios and use them along the way. They can look up things on the internet and be very powerful and intentional in the way that they go find information and then interpret information and apply it in different situations. So you'll see your students, they'll be on Desmos, they could be on a test and have a website up. That's totally fine. We don't put any restrictions on them at all, because we want them to be able to do that. And that's what we think is going to happen, as Ms. Eisenhower alluded to, in this world that we're in right now. Bosses are going to want them to be able to go get their information and bring it back and utilize it. So we incorporated that into our courses, and hopefully it will also be incorporated into all their courses here, not just mathematics, but every course that they take here. And that's kind of where we see this math journey going, is we want them to become an expert learner, and we want them to have a deeper connection to math concepts that are interwoven throughout the entire course and interwoven in the next courses that they're going to study from us as well. So that's the big idea behind why we're doing things slightly different. But the content's not changing at all. Math doesn't really change. It's the same math that they'd be seeing in any school in our district. They may just experience it slightly differently. So that's where I wanted to take you next. Was I wanted to give you just an idea of what can you expect from your child on a daily basis, just so that you can actually see it and experience it. And then maybe, I know teenagers don't always give you the whole picture. Maybe this will help close some of the loops along the way for things that you've heard your child talk about, but you may not have gotten all the detail you were looking for. So we're going to push towards what are we experiencing with mathematics? Next slide. All right. So 3 things that we kind of require on a daily basis. We require them to engage in notes. And this isn't a direct taught. Some of it is, some of it is not. A lot of it is student discovery, and we love that. But they're going to come in and they're going to fill out notes first. So notes look like something along these lines. I just grabbed one randomly. This was the geometry day 1 notes for IM2. And what you'll notice is we give them the learning objectives at the top. So some parents are saying, what is it that you want my child to learn? And this is where you go to find that. The very top of the notes for every class is going to say that. We're going to cover academic vocabulary because we're all about identifying barriers. And we've noticed that a lot of the things that we're doing and saying, that's a barrier for students. So to put it there, draw attention to it, and then use it is one of our key focuses as well. And you should hear them talk. It is incredible. The academic language that they're using now is far greater than most of the years that I've been in education and teaching mathematics. They're asking really good questions and using these boards to express thought, and that is just a win in itself. So what I wanted to do is just kind of give you a small example and not go too mathy on you. But this would be an example of a problem that we would throw out to students. And I hope that I can articulate the connection. So we're studying geometry, but the first thing we're asking them to do is use their knowledge of linear functions, which is something that we've studied prior to geometry. So we're trying to get them to make connections between restricting domains of linear functions in the geometry world right now. And then we just continue to do these things throughout. So this is just an example of us trying to integrate a topic from one season to the next season along this math journey so that they could see why they would need to use a restricted domain anywhere. Well, it makes a line segment in geometry. So that was just one example. And as we work through, I also wanted to point out, what is a midpoint of a segment and how do we determine it? This was one of the coolest parts of my day. We don't tell them you need to use this formula. What happens is somebody usually looks something up and they become an expert learner. They use the technology, they go find it, and then they have a discussion about it. And that leads them to a couple of different ways to do this. And that's what we push in our department is, yeah, you could totally do it this way. Or somebody else may think about it and do it this way. And the more that they hear those things, the deeper the connections become. And that's kind of just one of the big pushes that we try to make. Not only that, but with the length as well. They can use the distance formula, they can use Pythagorean theorem, they can use all these different things. And whatever they use that makes a connection and makes sense for them, as long as they can explain it to us, it's completely viable. And we love it when we see multiple ways to approach a different problem, because all it's doing is reconnecting all those things that they've already known and discovered in mathematics already. And I think that that's a powerful thing, is being able to make connections along the way. Something else, I'll skip through some of these examples right here. Something else that was a huge push from the students is they said, hey, can we add something else to the notes? Can we get additional resources? So down at the bottom of every set of notes now, we are linking Khan Academy videos, not only videos, but extra practice problems and things like that, because it was a need from the students. So somewhere along the way, they felt they needed this piece. So we wanted to provide that for them also. So that was another adjustment where the notes weren't enough for some of the students and they needed just that extra practice, a little bit more traditional. But if you need the practice, perfect. We'll run with it. So they should be taking notes. A lot of these, some of them are done on paper pencil. They take pictures, they upload them. Some people just keep a notebook and some people just do it all online. And that's another part of this whole UDL is make it work for you, find a system, and then carry out that system in every class that you're working towards. Just find a way that works for you, because if I made them do it all one way, that's going to put another barrier in front of another child. So we're very versatile in the way that we're trying to get the students to access the information as well. All right, that's pretty much the notes. And then we move on to the assignments. So from there, we ask the students to do two things every night. Number one, we ask them to do a self-assessment. Number two, we ask them to do a portfolio. We ask them to do it in that particular order. We are kind of hard on that one. You need to do the self-assessment before you get to the portfolio. And the reason for that is when you get to the self-assessment, here's just an example, same day, same notes. And you'll notice it's not the same question. It's not the same thing, exactly the same as what they did in class. It's got a little tweak to it. And we're good with the little small tweaks, but it's the same ideas. We're still talking endpoints and segments. We're still talking length. We're still talking midpoints, parallel lines, and everything else. But here's the kicker. Here's why we want them to do this first. There's a video from one of our math department teachers that tells them exactly what they're supposed to do, or at least one way to solve these problems. So if your child's getting stuck, that's a huge resource for them. And we keep pushing that in class. And actually in the paragraph down below, we say, all right, not only do we want you to watch the video when you're done, even if you're confident, we want you to go back and correct this thing. Because there's things that you may do that are just little small pieces that you can actually adjust and go a little deeper, or a misconception, or you may find that I have no idea how to even do the midpoint. I need to go to Hub to figure that out. So there's lots of layers to watching the video and analyzing and self-reflecting on where they are in their performance. After this is where the real independent practice comes in. So we've taken notes in class, we're taking the self-assessment, we've watched the video. The last thing we ask them to do is to go over their portfolio. And their portfolio is a couple-fold. What we want them to do is we want them to really push the independence at this point. There's no video for this one. So as they come up with that, they're coming up with their own solution, again, along the same lines, but maybe a little bit different than the notes and or the self-assessment. But this is the first time that they've ever been, okay, I have to do it all on my own. And what we really encourage them to do is to communicate with one another, and talk about what it is and why it is important and what is it that you're still missing. So again, that self-reflective learner of having them go through and experience the math. And then if they're not getting it, what a lot of us are doing now that we have this new schedule, this hybrid schedule for Wednesday, is we're allowing students to come into breakout rooms and talk about these things. A lot of the teachers are not pushing, here's how you do these problems. Instead, we're facilitating how you would approach the problem and trying to give them a pointed direction. But again, we want them to do these problems instead of us doing the problem, they copy it down, because then they've never had a chance to actually experience it independently. And that's a huge step in mathematics, is being able to take it and go, okay, I've got this, I can do it. So that's the intent behind the portfolio. And then what we do after that is we assess them. So you'll find that most of the time, teachers in the gradebook, they're grading the portfolios. And we're doing a few portfolios and giving them some really pointed feedback. But their time to shine with the other students in the class is when they get into breakout rooms or they're live or they're on a Zoom call. The more they talk about what it is that they did and how they approached the problem, the deeper their level of understanding grows as well. And that brings us to a summative assessment. At the end of each unit, and sometimes partway through a season, what we're going to do is we're going to assess the students, and that looks a little bit different, partly because we're in this Zoom world, and partly because of us trying to incorporate some new ideas. Students are great on a rubric. There's a rubric that goes with the criteria that tells them exactly what they need to do and show, and where they need to get to so that they can score a 5, a 3.5, or a 2 on a particular criteria in a rubric. And those are shared out with students a few days before the test, so we can have some conversations in class and make sure we understand what's in the rubric. And they've grown so much in that area. At the beginning, it was very weird and unfamiliar for them. But as we've done a few of them, now they like it because they know exactly what they need to focus their studying in on, and they can push to make sure that they understand that for the assessment, instead of showing up and going, I have no idea what's going to be on there. I hope I studied the right stuff. So that's one of the big differences with our department, is we are grading everything on a rubric. As we work through the summative assessments, everything is done through video. That's just a product of the world we are in right now, is we have to make sure that students are getting an explanation to us. It's so easy for them to get a solution from somewhere and not be able to explain and express their understanding. And so for us in the virtual world right now, that explanation, it becomes critical for us to be able to truly see, do they have a really deep understanding? Are they kind of approaching the standard, or are they not quite there yet? So you'll see the 3, the 2, the 5, the 3.5, and the 2 on everything we're grading for them, because a green is a 5, and that tells us, yep, you're on standard, you know what you're doing. A 3.5 means, yeah, somewhere in there, there's a few errors, or you didn't explain it deep enough. And then a 5 is, or a 2 is, you're just starting out. We need to work on this so that we can push you towards a better understanding and an explanation along the way. So you'll hear students refer to a green, yellow, red, or a 5, 3.5, 2. And that's because everything is graded that way. So a self-assessment, a portfolio, a summative assessment, that we all use the same markings for those, just for some consistency in their learning as well. And through this, there's been adjustments along the way. So what we've done is we've taken students and we are reflecting on our process too. The notes do not look the same as they did in the beginning. The self-assessments have adjusted and evolved over time, And it's a product of us listening to what students are saying, providing us feedback, us reflecting, and trying to make some big changes so that the students have a better experience on this math journey. And here are some highlighted things that we have come across with reflections of students. We realize that some students need a little bit more direct instruction than what we would envision in class here, but we're still trying to facilitate discovery and learning along the way. That's more powerful than me spouting off the midpoint formula and then them doing it. If they go find it and try to understand what it's saying and then apply it, it's more likely that they're going to make connections than me just telling them, here's the formula, now go use it on this problem. We've just adjusted hub time. Tomorrow's going to be the first day. What we heard from a lot of students was, I'm in my class where I taught IM1 and IM2, and the IM1 students couldn't really get the time they needed, and the IM2 students didn't really get the time that they needed. So what we've done is we've split it across the department. We pushed out on Google Classroom for the students. Certain teachers will be teaching just IM1. And if you're in an IM1 course, you're going to go to that teacher for that day. And then IM2, if it's Tuesday, you're going to end up with this teacher. And they have a spreadsheet on that. And we've been talking about it and making adjustments. And we think it'll help. And if it doesn't help, we can always adjust again. So again, just trying to become and model that it's okay that it's not perfect because we don't expect perfection. But we can tweak and adjust along the way to make it better for everybody. Another thing that we did was we granted more time for portfolio discussions. A lot of students, they struggle with the portfolios, and they should, because they're not a level 1 question. It's a deep question that we're asking them daily. And a lot of them need to take a break from it for a couple of days and then go back to it even. And that's been a really powerful thing for a lot of them. They're used to homework being something they do to get credit for, and then they put it in a stack and they don't ever touch it again. But what we're trying to push is, no, it's a powerful tool that you need to go back and reflect and continue to grow with each day. And their suggestion was, can you give us some more time to talk about it with our friends? We need that time. We're at home. We don't have anybody to interact with. Absolutely. So we try to incorporate that into class as much as we can in the short hour that we have. But we've also said, all right, Wednesdays, that's what we're going to do on Wednesdays. Since we're asynchronous, we can put them into some breakout rooms. They can look at 2 or 3 different portfolios throughout the week that they've already been working on, and we can have some good dialogue and some good discussion on how we can make them better. And just speaking from my own students, they really valued that time today. And there was kids that hung out in the chat afterwards, and they just said, thanks for the time. We needed to talk about it. This is awesome. So another thing that could evolve over time, and it will evolve as the schedule evolves. And we're just trying to take everything in stride and make it as best as we can for each student. Another thing is we have made some big adjustments to the assessment rubrics. You can talk to your students about those as well. But we put on the assessment rubrics different things like timing and being able to explain, and also being able to push academic vocabulary. And we found that if we put it in the rubric, it's something that they really key in on. And then we're playing with adjusting of the points to balance the softer skills that they need for all their other classes and just in life compared to the math content. So sometimes you'll see the math content being like 2/3, 1/3, whereas before at the beginning of the year, it was almost a 50-50 split. So you'll see adjustments in the rubric as well. Another huge shift that we've made, again, student request. They like the videos from the self-assessments, but what they said was, the rubric's not enough for me on my assessments. I need more feedback than that. So instead of just saying, well, you're a green, a yellow, or a red in this particular criteria of the rubric, what we started doing upon student request was we've made videos to try to model what it is that we are looking for exactly. So again, students going, I need more feedback on assessments. And that was our answer to get them a lot more feedback along the way. The additional resources to the notes that I showed earlier, that was another one. Both parent and student have requested additional resources along the way. So we intentionally added those every day to the notes in all 3 classes. Just trying to push that there are other resources out there, and they had a hard time finding them. So we'll go find them for them and add them in, and they can use it as they see fit. And then the last part, we're really excited about this piece. We've heard you, and we think we have an answer to tutoring. I know a lot of families out there are taking their child to go get a tutor or going to whatever tutoring center that they deem appropriate so you can do what's best for your child. We're going to try to offer one here at West Park. We're going to bring in some students. We don't have older students that have been through the content yet. Eventually we will push towards that. So what we've done is we've relied on some students from Wood Creek. They're going to come over and they're going to run a math center for us. And that will be a place where your child can come on at the end of the day, and they can actually work with a tutor here that we can provide that would be free of charge to you and your families. So that's a big bonus in the fact that we just want them to be able to seek another resource, and somebody that is here with our somebody that's here on ground that can answer questions with our content and things like that. So that would be a huge resource that we're hoping you find to be beneficial. So those are some of the adjustments that we made. And like we said, it hasn't been a perfect, smooth rollout. Everything is fluid in this situation, and we're trying to get better every single day. And I want to praise the admin and the people that I work with. They've been amazing, and they're doing everything that they think about is how can we best serve kids? What's the best way that we can take care of our kids? And it's so refreshing to work with all of these people that share a passion and want to do things a little bit different, but in the back of our minds, think about what are ways that we can improve things so that we get success in the way that we want it to be throughout their time here at West Park. And it's only been 1 quarter, and we're going to make a ton of adjustments by the time your kiddos are seniors. I just know it's going to happen. So I'm so excited for the opportunity, but I want to make sure that we are getting what we need. And Mrs. Guzman, I think that you are monitoring questions.
I am. Thank you so much,
I
Mr.
have some
Parr.
questions, Mr. Park.
Oh, Mr. Adib, can you wait just a moment, please? We're
Okay.
going to call on people. Just one moment, please. I just wanted to set a couple of kind of ground rules just so that we're not talking over one another. Zoom can be really hard. So similar to a back to school night, this is for the whole community. So we will want your questions to be not super specific to your student. We are very happy to have individual meetings with you. If you have a specific question about your student or their grade, a better format would be to have a meeting with your student's teacher, because we don't want to cross those lines in a meeting like this.
Can I piggyback just really quick on that? I forgot I wanted to say this. I've loved, and I know Ms. Guzman is, we love talking with our parents. These are, you're our partners, you're our community. I really encourage you to find that teacher and connect with that teacher. And email is not always the best way of doing that, especially when it entails a longer conversation. And our math teachers would love to Zoom with you. They would love to meet with you, whatever is needed in order to get that relationship and that clarity going. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. And I agree. Zoom meetings have made it a lot easier for us to have meetings with parents. We've actually really loved Zoom from the perspective that we can be face-to-face with you without you having to leave work or us having to, meet it with masks on and things. So we will be happy to do additional meetings. A couple of other things. I'm going to ask you to use the raise my hand feature in a moment, but I have had quite a few questions in the chat. And so I'm going to actually read those first, because I think many of them will answer some questions that have come up. When we do call on you, when you use the raise my hand feature, which I'm hoping is there, I don't see any hands raised yet. If it is not, we're going to have you write your name in the chat and I will call on you.
James Flanagan has a raised hand.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we'll get there in just a minute. Let me go through the ones that have already been asked in the chat. And then I will actually let Mrs. Eisenhower do the hand raising piece alongside me. So Mr. Parr, the first question that was asked was, you made mention that the notes are not direct taught, it's done through discovery. And a parent wanted you to expand upon that a little bit. So can you explain what that looks like and how they know that they have the correct notes?
Sure. So each day your child will log on to Google Classroom and there will be a set of notes there that are available to them. And what we try to do is go through each example and get through the set of notes in the day. But what that looks like is more of a discovery piece. So we'll ask a question, we'll give them some time to think about it. And then what we're going to try to do is facilitate a discussion throughout the entire class or in breakout rooms, just kind of depends on the nature of how difficult things are going to get. And then bring it all back as a whole class and make sure everybody's good before moving on to the next example. But we give ample time for students to ask for clarifying questions and to address issues. And if we need to step in and direct teach something that we see a mistake in what they're doing, if the students don't see it, we're not going to leave them hanging and say, oh yeah, we'll get there's a mistake there, but we're not going to talk about it. No, we'll go and we'll address issues as they come up. But what we push for is more student-led discussions with us pushing questioning techniques to get them to go where we'd like them to go in a direction. So we know where we want to get to at the end, and sometimes it takes a little while to get there, but the students discovering it is way more powerful than us telling them exactly what they need to do. And what happens most of the time is they come up with multiple ways to express their understanding. And we encourage that and we talk about it and celebrate those differences, because that shows a deeper level of understanding on, I did it this way, but I found this way, and they're actually the same and they're similar in some ways. So instead of us just giving them one way, we're pushing that they use multiple methods and they go around and try to figure out what they can and figure out where they're starting to get stuck, and then have facilitated conversations about those.
Okay, the next question is more directed at Ms. Hildebrand, and I know she's on to answer questions like this. If a student is unhappy with the grade they received, can they do credit recovery, and what will credit recovery look like? So Mrs. Hildebrand, do you have an update at all on that for us? I know things have been changing due to our COVID shift.
Yes, so credit recovery since COVID has definitely shifted. At this point, there isn't a current credit recovery session going on for our students. They're starting with seniors in our district and going down. But I do know that there are going to be some new credit recovery options and sessions that are opening throughout the next quarter and then into the next term. So yes, if you did not earn the grade that you thought that you wanted to earn, so but this is limited to D's and F's, you can do credit recovery through independence. At that point, you can just reach out to myself or for freshmen or Mr. Baines for sophomores, and we can definitely get you the application and all the instructions at that point. Right now, we don't have a date, so that's not very helpful, but we're on our email all the time checking and making sure. But if your student gets a D or an F, they can take that at credit recovery, and then their grade that they get there actually replaces the D or the F that was on their transcript before. Just a point of clarification though, that F doesn't go away from the transcript, it just won't count in the GPA. So when they go to apply to college, when they need to have a transcript printed out for military or anything of that nature, the replaced grade actually counts in their GPA.
Ms. Hildebrand, can you just, because this question showed up in the chat, credit recovery is available in most of our courses across our curricular areas, not just math, correct?
Correct. Yes, correct. There's credit recovery for everything. Well, I shouldn't say everything, most things. So I know that Mr. Baines actually reached out to some sophomores early on this year. We had some openings in the district for health, for example. And so we reached out to families to get them registered. So yes, if there's a different grade in a different subject, please just contact us and we can walk you through that process of what credit recovery looks like.
And in addition to that, I will add, we're a young school looking to meet our community where the need is. There are schools in our district that have been able to run successfully some credit recovery programs on campus. And so that's not something that we aren't willing to look at. Usually it is run through Independence High School, which is located over by Roseville High School. And it doesn't require your student to go there all the time, but they do have to go there at times. And so for instance, Antelope High School runs some of their own sections of credit recovery. So if we start seeing a need for that based on transportation and other things, if we have the availability of enough students and an instructor, that's something we could also look at as well. So it's a great question. Thank you. Mr. Parr, you talked about rubrics and the 1 through 5 and the colors, and a parent's question is, does that translate to percentages and grades? Is there any way for them to see a correlation between those two?
So the answer to that in short is yes. So if they are going onto their portfolio, let's just pick a portfolio and start there. They're going to get either a 5, a 3.5, or a 2, or a 0 if they didn't do it, but most children are doing it. So then that percentage will go into the grade book out of 5. The other thing, and then the same thing on the rubrics as well. So we'll look at the different criteria, and those are always out of 5 points per criteria. So if there's 5 criteria, the rubric is out of 25 points, and we take the total from each of those categories, and it's out of those 25 possible points. The other thing that we find to be pretty innovative that we're trying to do is the math journey is so important to us that we replace along the way. So if a student turned in a portfolio and they were not satisfied with it, they can resubmit it and we can give them credit later on up until the last day of the unit. Or if they show us on the assessment that they actually can perform at a level that we were hoping that they would perform at, then we'll go back and replace the portfolio grades as well. And then the last part of that piece is during midterms, we took different sections by season and we looked at the original rubric for the test, graded the exact same way as far as criteria on the rubric, totally different problems, which allows them to demonstrate an understanding. And if their score was higher, we went back and we replaced the test scores for that particular section as well. So the whole idea is we want you to keep working at it, to understand it, and to learn it. So long story short, yes, it correlates to a percentage, and that's how we're giving them their grade. But we also like to pursue them to keep pushing and keep adjusting till they get to that 5 out of 5.
Thank you. I have additional questions in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and break to a couple of our hands raised. So Mr. Flanagan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. So first of all, I just want to say I'm really excited about this new approach. And, I think you guys are doing a great job. I love that we're thinking about math differently and thinking about things differently. But my question is, I think we have a gap between where the kids are coming into the school and what we're expecting of them. So can you guys speak to how you're trying to fill that gap and how you're trying to change their mindset? So are you partnering with the middle schools to get the kids prepared? Are we working on maybe doing something like a pass fail for the first quarter rather than doing like an actual grade if they're not getting it? Or is there something else that we're doing to help with that transition?
Mr. Parr, you want to take that?
Yep. So very good question. In regards to articulating with the feeder school, I met with Chilton's math department. I have access to their Google Drive so I can see what it is that they're doing. And what we try to do is also push some of the concepts that they learned in their 8th grade math into our courses and continue to embed it all the way throughout, just to show them the connections to even the earlier math than when they got into IM1 as well. As far as pass fail, we have not explored that. I am always open to bouncing ideas off of the department. But I think we get into some, and Ms. Hildebrand can jump in if she needs to, some equity issues in comparing GPAs in college admissions and things like that, when some people are pass fail, but other courses are ABC, and along those lines, there's a little bit of muddying of the waters there. So that's why we've chosen to stick to the traditional scaling for scoring. But again, trying to make adjustments and meet kids where they are is our #1 goal. We know that there are some crazy situations out there where students are coming from different sites and they had online learning and they didn't cover certain areas in their mathematics. Say they're in an IM2 class and they came from a school in the district, but during distance learning, their teacher didn't cover a certain area of the content. We're very aware of what's happening now, and we've scaled back tremendously just because we only have them for an hour right now as well. So a lot of the things that we're doing, we're trying to scale it back, and it will look a lot, even a little bit more integrated as we are able to push to an hour and a half, 5 days a week, and getting back towards that direction. But we're very much aware, and we cut out an entire season already in the first quarter. We were supposed to do a solving season. And so what we did was we just took the most important elements out of that and put it into our solving. And we cut out systems, we cut the systems out and put some of those concepts into solving because our students needed more time in other areas and we didn't have enough time in the schedule. So we're constantly making adjustments and trying to meet students where they are along the way. So I don't know if there's any other grading, Ms. Hildebrand, that I need to cover, or but we try our best to meet students where they are and kind of
Can I add one thing to that too?
Sure.
Somebody put this in the chat and I want to just make sure we really address this. We recognize there's different levels to this conversation. So we are definitely going to do everything we can to partner with Chilton. They've already been a great partner to us as we've opened this school and continue to work with them. One of the questions in the chat, and this is something that we're currently talking about, is that we have a lot of students who had IM2 in the spring, which was primarily online, and now they're taking IM3 and it's primarily online with shortened class periods. And so we are looking to we're talking about a potential bridge class of some kind in the spring, instead of moving students directly to pre-calculus, looking at their skill set, looking where they are. Not something that wouldn't look good on a college transcript or something like that, but an actual math credit course that we could spend some more time with them on the concepts that are going to make them successful past IM3. So more to come on that. I also see in the chat, not everyone comes from Chilton. We are well aware of that. The bulk of our feeders do, but we know where everybody's coming from. And so we will work with as many schools as we can, but that's where our teachers have to do a great job when students come in and they start seeing those gaps, and they are. So Mr. Parr and Mr. Pagel, Mr. Peterson and Ms. Molina are having to look at students individually and see where those gaps might have occurred. A lot of schools did online learning very differently from different districts in the spring, and so that did lead to different gaps. So thank you for all of those comments. Please, if you have a student in IM3, we are investigating some solutions for the spring. And so we will be sending out some options to you to make sure that we move your student forward fully prepared, knowing that they've had about a year of online math in a lot of cases. So hopefully that helps as well. Mrs. Hill, I'm going
You
to
can
have
see that. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to have you unmute and go ahead and ask your question. I'll go back to some more chat questions.
Hi, thank you so much first for all the changes you guys are making and hosting this webinar. I think it's really important for all of us to know of these changes. I don't think the kids always communicate that, so thanks. A question for you guys. I have a few, so I'll go as quickly as possible. One, how are you guys handling late assignments? I know that there's no excuse for not having time, but for whatever reason, sometimes children don't get them in. Are they able to turn in late assignments?
I'll take that. So with regards to our assignments, we have the self-assessment assignments, and those are actually, we're not gathering those for grading purposes. That is solely for the kids to kind of gauge themselves and where they're at in their learning for that particular concept. So when we gather portfolio assignments from them, we give a deadline on the night of the day that the assignment was posted. So we go over a concept, and then that evening that portfolio is due. However, we have told all of our kids that that is not a locked deadline. They actually have until the day before an assessment to get their portfolios turned in.
Okay, great. I definitely agree with the deadline, but for whatever reason, I know it doesn't always happen. Another question I had was about discovery. I think it's one of the best ways to learn is through self-discovery. I'm curious how you're handling the introverted kids who ideally you think they do well with self-discovery, but they're not going to share those portfolios. They're not going to speak on a when they're in the, what's it called, the Zoom. I can't think of those rooms. When you get the breakout rooms, thank you. When they're put into those breakout rooms, their cameras are off, and I know that you guys have encouraged them to have their cameras on, and they're literally mute kids. How, and I know you may not have an answer for this, but just something to consider, like how can we get those kids to truly participate, because that's how discovery happens.
It's a really good question, and it's a struggle that we all face. And it's not just a math issue. It's
totally.
But at some point, the students have to take some ownership in wanting to put themselves out there, and we don't force them to turn their cameras on and unmute and do all those things that are intimidating to some students that just they can't handle that. But we do make sure that they are involved in every conversation as best we can. But there are times where I can't grab a kid and say, stop looking at your phone right now.
For sure.
Not in front of me anymore.
Totally.
So it's a maturity thing. We're all learning. And if some of them figure that out by the end of the year, that I need to do this for myself, that's a huge win. But there's some things that are kind of out of our hands in the world that we're living in right now. But we do our best to encourage. We do our best to try to understand. We know that there's technical difficulties that happen. And the biggest thing we push to them is talk to us, communicate with us, send us an email, let us know what's going on. And we try to be as versatile and adjust as much as we possibly can to their individual needs. But there are certain things that we don't have control over that we wish we had a little bit more control over. And I'm sure you feel that as a parent sometimes.
Absolutely.
Mr. Parr, Mr. Parr, can you add, with students coming back with the hybrid, and I know not all students can, so we recognize we're still going to be engaging students on Zoom. So I don't want us, but are you seeing added engagement when they're live in front of you with this program?
That's when we can force those issues a little bit more. We can make sure they're not on their phones. We can look at their screens and see what they're looking at. And we can encourage them to bounce ideas off of each other. And the really cool part is that there's some students that are, they're obviously 2/3 of your class are still on a Zoom call, but doing our best to try to mimic what's happening so that they can hear the dialogue that's happening along the way. And then the Zoom kids get piped in through the speakers and the system that we have here, which is amazing. And the students that are present can actually hear that we don't push them onto the Zoom call while they're in the classroom, because there's just audio feedback and all kinds of other issues. But the ones that are in class, there is a lot of engagement. Yep, two people are nodding at me. More, better, more engagement, because it's there and it's personable and it's easier for them to. And some of them stay in their desks and do their work on their computer and don't engage, like you discussed that student as well. But even in person, just being there, somebody can lean over and say, am I thinking about this right? And then they engage a little bit more than maybe they would in a Zoom call.
Miss Molina wanted to. Oh, sorry, Mrs.
No, I was
Hill.
gonna say that's good to hear.
Miss Molina's going to add to that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was gonna add in it. So my experience in special ed, we have a lot of that like introvertedness, or it's getting hard for them to participate and engage, especially through discovery. So what I've been including and like kind of telling the departments like social emotional learning, and it's not necessarily doing a whole different lesson. It's just really building on that relationship with the students. And I've realized that once like we invest in like their feelings and like the value of them, a lot, like a little social piece, and then all of a sudden they spark up, because math can be like fear inducing. It can cause, anxiety and so forth like that. So so I always try to incorporate like a little bit of a social piece, or when I notice things get stagnant and all the mics are muted and all the cameras are off and even all the faces are masked inside the classroom, just do a little social piece like, okay, everyone, just tell me like, your favorite pizza, or like who's going to win, the World Series, or, who's your favorite sports team. And all of a sudden they start cracking near the surface and forget that we're in math. And then we go back to math.
That's great to hear. And sorry, I have one last question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mrs. Hill, if you have one more, go for it, and then we'll move on.
The hub time, do you guys feel like that's being used or utilized in the correct way? And I know, I just want to make sure that time, if you guys are going to take any suggestions, I would really encourage, because the students don't do it, at least a mandatory one a month or once a week or something, because I don't know, and you guys can let me know, I just don't know if it's being utilized the way it should be.
Another good point. It goes back to the students and where they want to engage. Some great things that we're seeing are students will just get onto Hub and they may sit there with their mic off and their camera off, but they're just working on their assignments in case they have a question. There's a lot of students, at least that's what I've experienced in my Hub sessions. But again, I have a hard time reaching through and grabbing a kid and saying, get on Hub. And I know that parents are working and things like that as well. So the biggest thing that I would suggest is if you have a child that you have identified and we have identified, trying to find a way for a check-in or something like that. A simple email, did my child make it to Hub today? That's an easy response that we can get back to you and let you know who's attending, who's not attending, just so that you can have a better idea. And it's all about partnering with the parents and trying to, we are very aware of high school students and high school student behavior. So we want to partner with you, and there's a little forcing that might need to happen, but I think once they find success, then the value comes as well. So we'll definitely need some help on that end from you guys as well.
Mr. Parr, we've also talked about the potential of the ticket into our tutoring center will be attendance at Hub, so that we can ensure that the teacher is having the opportunity to work with the student and even give the student some things that they might ask at the tutoring center. Like, here's what I think you need to work on. Because what we don't want is a circumventing of the teacher, because the teacher really needs to know what's going on with your student. And so we were talking about how would we handle the tutoring center? And that was one of the conversations we've had. We're really hoping, Mrs. Eisenhower, I've had a lot of questions about when we're going to be up and running with that.
Right. Yeah.
Know our timeline right now?
Very soon. We're in the middle of the hiring process, and we don't anticipate that taking real long. So we're hoping within the next week or two. Yeah.
So hopefully middle of next week, we'll have the tutoring center, and that will be a live tutoring center in our student union, which is at the end of our administration building here. And we will make sure you have all the information. Your student will need to wear a mask in the tutoring center because it will be live. So we will get all that information out to you. We anticipate, are we looking still at 2 days a week? Tuesday and
We were
Thursday?
going to say Tuesday, Thursday. Mhm.
Okay. And then we'll see as needed what we need to do. I have a lot of questions. So here's, I'm in the respect of time, we can go about 15 more minutes. I'm going to let a couple more live people ask questions. If you could try and hold it to one question and maybe submit your others, if you have more than one, that's okay. If we don't get to everybody tonight, I am cataloging all of these and we will answer them and put them out when we put out this, the link to this meeting. But the name on the screen says Santry. Why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask us your question? Are you there?
Mr. Pantry, are you with us? I know we've talked before.
Okay, while we're waiting on them, the screen name James iPad, do you have a question?
I do, yes, thank you. One of the teachers had mentioned that the math classes were a little bit behind and that they skipped a whole section. And partly because of that was due to the fact that the class used to be an hour and a half and now it's only an hour. Is there any thought about resuming more of a routine class schedule, whether it be distance learning or in-class learning, so that the classes don't get further and further behind?
Mr. Parr, I don't know.
I don't think I have any control over this schedule. I mean, I don't know how to answer that.
I didn't catch, part of it was cut out for me. Can you maybe rephrase for me?
So the question was, is there any way to adjust the schedule so that it is conducive for the hour and a half that the students are used to?
The concern was that students would be getting behind by missing key pieces of content with the hour schedule.
Yeah, and that is it's a great question. Thank you. So the principals have had many the principals in our district, have had many conversations about this because it does catch up with us in certain subject areas more than others. So we are working within those departments, things like world language and math, where students might have things they miss. We're going to ask our staff to backfill those things as students move forward. That's why I was talking about something like a bridge class from IM3 into pre-calculus. An option would have been just to shove all the curriculum that they need into our current system, but that would never have been best for kids. So we're going to have to look at some unique solutions. I will tell you that and I'm not sure if the email went out today for your January choice, but we are looking at longer classes starting in January when we are able to go back. And I think that will be very helpful. But I know that Mr. Parr and his team have narrowed the scope of what's going on. Because we don't want to push harder and faster than we should, because it won't be good. I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully a little bit.
On that area, we have made sure that the choices that we've made in what we're taking out of content will not have an impact further down the road. So that's one of the beauties of the season part and us creating it as we go through, is we are very aware that some of the students have not covered this particular content. So going forward, or even aligning as we are right now, we are having those conversations pretty much daily, as far as where did we get to? Do we need to slow down? Do we need to speed up? What needs to, was that an emphasis for the day? So we're very aware of that, and I appreciate the question. But by no means will your child fall so far behind that they are not ready for the next level course. That's not a concern that we have. The only concern that we did have was, like Ms. Guzman alluded to, was the IM3 students that are pushing and are ahead of classes and course sequencing as it is right now. They may have missed some of the content just because of where they've taken their classes and the speed at which it's happened.
Thank you. Thank you. Screen name Santry said, you can just send me your question and I'll use it in just a second. It looks like the mic's not working. Mr. Parr, can you I'm gonna give you I'm trying to consolidate some of these. There's a question about test taking time. It usually takes 45 to 50 minutes to solve the problem. And the explanation video takes 15 to 20 because of multiple takes. I guess the question is can there be more time for test taking? I think that's the question, if I'm saying it correctly.
So one adjustment that we did make as far as test taking goes is they actually have more than just that hour. We give them the extra 15-minute passing period for that buffer time because of the feedback we were getting from students was it takes a couple takes to make sure it goes. And then there was issues with uploading and things like that. So as long as the students are in communication with us about what's needed and when it's needed, and obviously if there's accommodations that need to be made, we fully support those and we find a way to make it work. But it's kind of a case by case, and you have to be an advocate for yourself as well and let us know what's happening, because there's students that the tech doesn't work perfectly. So we find ways to make it work. So we have them join us during hub time, or we schedule a time that we can actually interview the student instead of doing the video because the tech just didn't work that day. But we are very restricted with the 1 hour, just because anything beyond that, now there's the chance where students could communicate with somebody else and sharing of thoughts and ideas beyond that hour. So we do try to push it down and put it into one period, and we adjust the tests and the assessments to try to fit in that time frame as well. But again, have your child communicate with their teacher and let them know what specifically is happening and what is causing that barrier so that we can work towards a better solution for that particular student.
I've had a few questions about our Zoom students. So I want you to know, all of you to know, that we recognize our kids at home are equally as important as our kids in front of us, because all of our kids are at home some point during the week. So we don't want them missing things. The question is there a way to increase audio for those on Zoom? Zoomers are finding they can't hear the students up at the smartboard or when the teacher is instructing while taking notes. Are you guys using the audio system yet in the classroom, or is that not being utilized quite yet?
So the problem with the audio system that we found is it's the same issue. And it's one of those things where us as teachers, we're trying to relay as much of it onto the Zoom calls as much as we can, but they pick up what we're saying. But when we get to somebody across the room that's talking, they can't hear that. So we're continuously trying to hear what they're saying, relay the information. And if we have a better solution, we're all for it. But that's just one of those that we're trying to work through. So again, the biggest thing the students can do is unmute and say, wait, where did that come from? Who said what again? And they're getting better at it. Again, this has only been a week of them trying to figure out and navigate this new twist in our Zoom sessions. And those things are coming up, and we're trying to address them as best we can. But if we have other ways to make it better, we'll work on it, and we'll do it with the kids.
I will highlight that differently in my sheet here too. We will work with our technology department. Sorry, I'm not keeping track of who asked these questions. Otherwise, I would address you by name. But it will work with our technology department to see if there's any other way to handle that. We do have embedded voice amplification in our classrooms, and we're trying to tie that in with our Zoom system. It's a benefit we have, but it isn't perfect. And so we're going to continue to try and work with that. I'm curious if there's a handheld microphone or something that could be added into that, although then we have kids touching different things. So we have all these COVID issues that we have to work through, but I did highlight it, and we'll look further into that. I'm going to ask you one more question. I think a couple of questions about, it's kind of twofold. One is, our feeling on the hub time is that by separating out by class, that's going to support students. The questions being asked around them are going to be pertaining to their course. So each of you, so there's going to be at least one teacher addressing every level every day. Okay, so that I think that question got cleared up. One of the other questions is, what is being done when we see students that are failing? So is there a system to bring them back to Hub or to require anything additional of them? I think that's the question that is being asked here. Or when Hub time isn't enough, is there something additional we can provide?
So initially Hub is the number one underutilized component. If a child's failing, we are encouraging them that they need to get to Hub. And whether that's to go over a test, whether that's to look at a portfolio a little deeper, whatever that is, that's, somebody asked earlier, is that an underutilized? For some students that are failing, it's difficult. It's hard for them to come to Hub knowing that they're having difficulty in expressing that, especially when they're not in person. So that's one of the big pushes that we're going towards, and I'm hoping that caveat that we put on how you get to our tutoring center is you have to go to Hub first. We're hoping that will help with a lot of those students, because now parents can say, well, I'm dropping you off at the tutoring center, and now they have to go to Hub or they can't even get into the tutoring center. So another thing that we're doing is encouraging them to make sure that they're looking at the self-assessment videos and utilizing them. Also looking at the rubrics and how to navigate those. So it's kind of a case-by-case situation, but we're having kind of those private conversations with students as best we can and trying to understand where they are so that we can meet them where they need to be and provide the best support that we can.
One of the other questions I received is, I think I'm going to read most of this because I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. They thanked us for sharing, which we appreciate that. My question is, could students be asked to apply and extrapolate concepts to new problems in assignments or quizzes rather than seeing that type of problem for the first time in high stakes tests? This way they would have a chance to practice and grow in confidence in the material before being tested on mastery. Does that make sense, Mr. Parr?
Yeah, I think that most of the problems we're selecting for the assessments are very much in line with what they're doing in their self-assessments and portfolios. They're not going to line up perfectly because we don't want the traditional cookie cutter of I've seen this, I do this, now I repeat this. What we found is a lot of students don't retain information that way. So the concepts don't change. We're not challenging them to anything that's completely unfamiliar to them. But what is different is the way that the question is asked might look slightly different, just like it is from, say, the notes to the self-assessment to the portfolio. There's not a huge jump and it's not a different topic. It's just a slightly different way of looking at it. And the other thing that's important to note is some of their portfolios are allowed to be used on some of the assessments as well. So if they're doing the work in class and they're doing the portfolios and keeping up with those, a lot of them insert them right into their assessment and show their level of understanding from work they've already done along the way. So I hope I addressed that.
Can I add something to that? I think one thing that I've been seeing with the math department is they've just been really diving into creating a curriculum that's very tightly aligned. So what they're doing in class and what they're asking students to do with their self-assessments and portfolio is that's expressed in that final summative. They're all in sync with each other. And I think we're not always used to that in conventional classrooms. Sometimes we're used to that pop quiz or that surprise that we're going to see in the test, but this is a very tightly aligned system of assessing learning. So it's a little bit different that way.
Mr. Parr, is it something, I know we're going to be posting a lot of this. Could we, I'm just thinking through maybe some of where that question's coming from. I'm wondering if we could have an example we walked parents through of it starts here, it goes here, it goes here, and this is where we end. Maybe they could explore that on their own. So perhaps we can give a good example of that. You kind of did that as you walked through things tonight, but maybe some of the linear thinking that's there that maybe their student isn't seeing that we could work through. So we can work on presenting some more of those examples.
Or even if that parent wants to reach out to one of the teachers
Yeah.
and say, can you show me that? I think that any of us would be willing to kind of take them on that journey so that they
Yes.
can better understand that as well.
That would
But
actually be even better. So perhaps whoever wrote that question can do that. Can we just briefly discuss, the question is, can we be guaranteed that finals will be on the pre-scheduled days and not given early? Can you address why we did that, and perhaps that we may do that again, but make sure that parents are aware of that?
yeah, so I don't think the high school students, I don't think the message got to the parents on this one. Our intentions were for finals, they get 1 hour. They were given 1 hour only. So they were told week in advance of what was going to happen on which days and which tests they would be taking and all of that. So the 1 hour was not enough for us to go back and give a test that would cover everything so that we could replace those test scores along the way, which was huge for most students. I would say that a large majority of students did better on the midterm than they did on the actual original assessment. So going back and replacing both of those scores brought students' grades up tremendously. But to answer the question in full, we needed those days so that the kids had the time. And you heard the other question about we didn't have enough time to do the question, shoot our video. An hour wasn't enough, even on the assessment. So to do 4 assessments in 1 hour would have been an impossible feat for us. So that's why the department chose, no, we're going to take that week so that we can give our students more time to really dive in and show us what they know so that we can give them what they deserve at the end by showing us that they truly understand this topic. So that's why we chose to go 4 days instead of the 1 day for assessments.
So Mr. Parr, if we were going to do that again at the end of this term, we would send an email directly to the parents expressing the days of assessment. We could do that.
Sorry, I was turning on the lights. I missed the
I
first.
noticed that. I said, if we were to repeat that, we could send out a message ahead of time directly to parents through Aries communication, expressing what days are what topics, and that way they have a better understanding.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. The last, one of the last questions, but I know there's a couple more people with hands raised. I see this person said, I see that there are vocabulary words in the notes. Should the students be defining them themselves?
So that's kind of on the students, whether they want to define them themselves. Most of the time during the lesson throughout the day, we are referring to it multiple times. So at some point, some students choose to look them up and define them. Other students throughout will go through, and I've seen students like just taking their notes and highlight when they use the word. So we're not checking the notes to see that they find them. What we do is on the assessment, there is a rubric criteria that is academic vocabulary. And our expectation is while they're going through their assessment, they're actually using the vocabulary we asked them to learn throughout the unit. So they're getting graded on that, and they don't have to hit every single academic vocabulary word. But when they are communicating to us what they're doing in their understanding, that's a part of really deeply understanding, is being able to apply those words. So some students don't even define them if they feel that they're not necessary, but we do encourage them to use them in the right context.
Thank you. One question that came up also on the notes is that Khan Academy is noted as an additional resource. Are those links specific just to that set of notes, or are they broader than that set of notes?
So those are, sorry, I looked to see if somebody else wanted to answer. So those are linked specifically to that topic for that day. Okay. So if there's a couple of topics and we found that Khan Academy doesn't cover everything we're covering that day, you may see 2 links to Khan Academy. Like I think the example I showed today, those were specific to that geometry lesson, where one was talking about perpendicular lines and the other one was talking about segments and how to find midpoints and distance and that kind of stuff. So sometimes we'll need to find multiple links to cover everything, but they are very specific to that particular day. And again, adjusting as we went. The ones at the beginning of the last quarter were not, they were more general. And the feedback we got from students was, we need more practice with that stuff for that day. So we've been very specific about taking them and applying them just for that particular lesson.
In the Khan Academy links, if they have like something that a student can work through, because some of the Khan Academy pieces have like a quiz or something, that's not an assignment that's graded by you. Generally speaking, the Khan Academy system will give them the answers or whatever, and it's just more for their own learning. They don't have to submit it to you all.
Yeah, no, not at all. That was more of, if you need the extra practice, if you need an additional resource outside of the notes, we're not going back and looking at them. But what we do try to find is videos with problems that they can actually work through. And then there's some tests and quizzes sometimes, but we wanted them to be able to see it and hear it one more time. And ideally, when we get back live, we want to video our own lessons and do those instead of the Khan Academy. So students can go back and rewatch them, but we're just not quite there yet with all the, whether or not students can be videoed and everything that goes with that. So for right now, we're looking at Khan Academy.
Okay. So we need to wrap up in the next 4 minutes in respect for everybody's time, but Mr. Adib started at the very beginning. And Mr. Adib, I wanted to make sure I got back to your question. If you have one, I hope you're still on. Go ahead and give us your question, Mr.
Well,
Adib.
thank you very much. First of all, let me commend you about the approach. How you execute it is another issue. The writings are nice, but we have to see the result. Actually, many of my questions were already discussed. I had a list of them, and so I really don't have to make those general questions, which were, pretty well covered. I have some specific questions for Mr. Parr, but I will make them by email because I can't take the time for a specific, which is kind of detail. I will have to discuss that separately with him by email.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad we answered some of them. And Mr. Parr would be happy to have a private conversation with you. We've already talked about
And
it.
if email is not the best form and you'd like to just speak to me, we can just shoot me an email that says, can we talk over the phone or can we Zoom?
Sure.
And then it looks like Mrs. Santry, I think you're on a phone and you can now unmute. And so if you would like to ask your question, we'll make that our last question of the evening, and then I'll give everybody directions on how to do more. Did we lose you again? Bummer. Okay. So I want to thank you. This community is awesome, and we appreciate you partnering with us tonight. I know our math team wants nothing more than to be in partnership with you as your students progress through the school. We know we're trying some things that are different, and it's pushing some comfortable zones for students, but that's where we think the magic is. There's courageous learning going on. And it's going to take some vulnerability to get us to where we want to be on our side and theirs. And so I hope what you saw tonight from our team was a willingness to listen and adjust along the way. We will continue to do that. I'm going to ask you, we are going to post this tomorrow. We will post it along with a link if there are additional questions that you have that didn't get answered. We'll ask you to submit them and we will answer them, or she's going to love her inbox being filled. Mrs. Eisenhower, her email is keisenhower.
Bring it on. I love our parents.
She is our assistant principal that's working with math, and she would love to partner with you as well. So please reach out to her if you're not directly talking to your student's teacher. Some of you we know don't have math till next term. You just joined us to figure out what was going on, which we love. So we are here and we want to be with you. We will probably do this again in January as a part of our back to school night. Math tends to be an area that there's a lot of questions. I know that because I'm formerly a math teacher, as many of you know. And so I've lived this world, and we want this to be an amazing place for your students in all subject areas. So I want to thank Matt and Darren and Ben and Jen, and Kayla had to jump off. She had a class tonight, but our math team is amazing. Thank you to you all. And thanks, Ms. Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Y'all have a good night. Look on
Thank
our,
you, our
we will
parents.
send this out. We'll get this out to you. Look on our website tomorrow if you need additional need to ask some additional questions with context. So
We value our parent community. Thank you for showing up tonight.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, you
you.
too.